the internet being instrumental in the spirit's reemergence to the spirit of truth, reemergence into history, will very well will have very little to do with religion, catechism, or the competing ideological spirits. As well as left off last time, such a dialogue was in process, rather a monologue. But it's a dialogue, and also in that it's seeking a response from the outside. And this handy tool seems to get into use almost every appearance, because it is looked at as the forum for action and how things are out there from wherever anyone could be, but there must be one, there must be a higher animal, and beyond that there must be one of the ones. He can turn himself into many things, and but it's looking for ones who have turned themselves into these things. The spirit of truth reemergence will permeate all surfaces of this sphere where receptivity is available, and what this serve as, this world wide web, is a mechanism for the mean to permeate over the surface, or once again to distribute itself over the surface of availability. And that's the forum for action, and that's why it serves as, and that's why it is. That's what it represents. It represents the language of renewal. It also occupies in itself the logos, this informing voice, this re-informing voice, this re-imaging voice. And this idea have been sitting deep within the recesses of memory for a while, as long as it has been under the process that brought it into digital broadcasting, through the medium of broadcasting available now and currently being used. The theme that the channel from whence it's poured, the cornucopia, the reason behind it, the stimulant behind it, the impulse behind it is to propagate the word, and that's the work, to propagate the word. There are diagrams that go along with everything that's being said, and there's the explanatory, well, the topographical, the literal interpretation, and there's a diagrammatic interpretation, still representing the same thing. Merely speaking of the chain of causality, where history is headed, preeminence, morphogenesis, the unmoved prime mover, the introduction of the world. Once again, to bring back this handy device. It is upon the form of action. It itself is subject to from the prime mover's sustenance. It requires sustenance. Under that, it itself goes through a slower decay than does many man faces just this one setting of the drama, or it's one order of magnitude. It's encapsulation of the forms. It's an encapsulation of the forms, but the forms could have taken on various forms, but out of variety, this formula emerged, this forum emerged, this forum for action emerged. And it's where experience have taken place. It's where most of the work has been done. It's where most of the deeds have been left. Upon this blue glowing form of action, organisms are continuously in perpetuity leaving behind copies of their genes after each of them have gone through the iteration of experience and has gained epistemological sophistication, he reevaluates what just it means to be the kind of thing that he is, a higher animal. And there is where it happens. There's where the story takes place, where you learn about humans, where you learn about what to do, how to talk, how to act, and how you can stay on their better side, how you can stay on their worse sides, their conflict, their misunderstanding, and everything that goes along with being in participation in contemporary human experience. Referencing the past, but keeping the present in primacy and starting at baseline, and then introducing uh, one's, well, navigating inventory to only hold on to this ecology of practices that's specifically designed for the continuity of peace of mind. And that's to find tranquility, and then that gets into the Gospel of Eden, the road, the path that exists, that is that equilibrated state, tranquil state. It is Eden. It has to be walled, it has to be protected, it has to be worked for, meaning there are certain courses of actions, there are certain actual jewels that only represent this state of being. And in any other state of being, there exists the potential for contradictory actual occasions to be into the happening by the exertion, by the assuming exertion, the irrational exertion, the undisciplined exertion, the passionate exertion, the misunderstanding exertion of one agent's one agency, of one agent's agency. And through this and that, develops a a reputation that identifies and it labels. And Eden, this state exists as such, and it begins additively. It is multiplication in its higher sense, because it's long chain of additions. It's, well, I say as is singularly is if it's unstarted, meaning there is vacancy. This is the world before man's introduction. It is without form, it's without void. It doesn't have any labeling, because for that labeling to emerge, there first has to be that emergence of that labeling agent. Man comes into being, to dominion. It's what he has special that signifies him, that characterizes him. In the absence of any, and then in the presence of, there is actual exertion, and those exertions represent something depending on the premeditation of the agents responsible for the exertion. And each of these have their roots into different, let's call them realms, occupiers, meaning that his roots to heaven, his roots to hell, are roots of insights or influences, and he's pulled by ideas he's not considerate of, behind the sphere that man is present to, this handy device. Beyond the sphere, the empirical setting of the drama that man is accustomed to, there is the realm of ideas that are ideas of influence. It influences him, it incites him. When he says he doesn't know what he did there, or he didn't know what he was doing, and unlucky, he truly does not know what he's doing. He's been hijacked. He's been seduced, and he's offline temporarily. At least what he considers himself when he resumes himself. When he resumes himself, and he rejoined. I don't know what happened, and I lost it there, and I snapped, and I was pushed to my limit, and my cup overfloweth, and so on. So he's hijacked, and then that's that case. Well, in this realm, in Eden, requires specific actions, meaning, for one, the actions are in accordance with something. The items of actions now are in accordance with something. They have their source, and their source is validated as such, because man longs for this. He has this unconscious longing for this state. he was motivated to this state. It serves a bias in opposition to other states of being. He understands that he wants to move towards something like pleasure and stay away from something like pain. Well, that's an axiom for action already. It's a permission for a certain type of action, and certain consequences of actions are delayed or prolonged. So then they become a part of. They become mixed into normal procedure, and these are means. They are not valid or sound in the grand scheme analysis, but they are persuasive, and they have a certain facility to bypass man's scrutiny to chase pleasure. But it's sustained pleasure. It's the pleasure that is worth pursuit. And Eden itself it's justified only in the time it can be present. So man is familiar with the state at the very beginning of his emergence to something like the very end. The middle especially is something of progress, is something of the journey, and that's the rise and fall of plot lines throughout history. Nature itself must be considerate of this fact, because it depends, said in other times and in different styles, that man is a particle, he's a thing of a cell. He exists like a thing of a cell, meaning that his actions can be determined, well, he causal change, but still considering the causal chain behind particle displacement is such that if you think of him as billiard balls, it takes certain action to lead on to certain actions. But man is recognizable with this a similarity, that he does share that quality. He could be, and he does speak of himself in that way, and he exists that way diagrammatically. So even still, Eden is justified by that time when it can be articulated of, when it can be spoken of in terms, hopefully encapsulated in this explanation, description, monologue, but a monologue with pictorial telos, that there is a frame, a picture being printed, that is being illustrated, and it is done with the words, with the first the initial distillation, and it's done with the diagram explaining the morphogenesis, the autopoiesis, the forum, and the stage of redemption, and so forth. That man will stage transition, and he will understand what the gospel, where he will understand the good news of Eden, and he will take that into prime consideration. His hierarchy of needs, considering Maslow to the very top, where it's self-transcendence, but one peak ahead of it, where afterwards there isn't much room for improvement, because he's maximally improved given his magnitude. That given man's magnitude, the only room for improvement is his next step in this iteration. Well, this next step in the stage and the stepping stones of ages that precede this next step, and it's him taking that leap into what it means to have this renewed understanding of what it means to be human, where he have a different definition, and he represents this differentiation rather, and he represents the differentiation in action, in group action, in collective choreography. It's a collective problem, and it's a collective solution to it. And when he takes this now, there's no stepping back in this case. There truly is not going back, because one thing man is missing is the experiential reference of just what it means to be in Eden, what it just means to be that tranquil, and the fact that it wasn't this possibility was not exploited earlier on, of course. And then crying over spoiled milk of history, but then only savage in the moment, and the present affords that savage ability of his gift of it many times cannot be reinforced, that it just means something different to pontificate, or well, to exclaim that a statement that there is something called aliveness, and you're it, and existence is it, and self-recognition is it. That there's no other. He doesn't have a ruler to measure the magnitude of that statement. It is the thing that is beyond all things. He's been introduced into the world sphere, and what advantage can be made of this opportunity.